Hi, I'm Emily,
And I'm Paulus.
and welcome to Up Your Arts.
See, we're supposed to not be laughing. This is the end of the series. We're supposed to have worked out how to do this by now, and she's still giggling. It's a podcast that explores how the arts can enrich your life. Well, at least this is enriching your life right now, Emily.
Yeah, it was just, I noticed as soon as I said, hi, I'm Emily, you were taking a drink of water, and I was like, oh no, I started too soon.
So that reminds me of this really lovely Snoopy cartoon. You know Peppermint Patty and Marcy in the Peanuts cartoons. There's this thread, and it goes on for about a fortnight, because obviously it was a daily comic. And there's a book report due, and every day Marcy says to Peppermint Patty, "Have you done your book report?" And sometimes they're playing baseball, sometimes they're walking home, but it goes on and on and on and on and on. And then the end of it, 2 weeks into this seemingly endless joke, they have to hand in their book report, and Peppermint Patty does, and Marcy realizes she hasn't done it because she's been so busy telling Peppermint Patty to do her job. Tell me, how are people keeping creative at the moment? Have we heard from listeners?
Yes, we have heard from listeners, and I also wanted to see if it's okay if I could talk about Henry, my nephew, because last recording I got very emotional.
Yeah, you did.
Yes, and so I had a wee chat with him recently, and he told me about how he came up with the poem. So they were doing, in his homeschooling, they were doing Shakespeare. And as part of that, he had to do a little poem. So if I can keep it together, shall we read out the poem?
So let's just remind everybody, this is from our episode with Naomi Paxton.
Yes.
Our episode 11, our tremendous researcher and suffragette Naomi Paxton, and we were talking about things that had happened recently, including homeschooling, and you were telling us about this poem that he'd written.
Yes, and I really wasn't able to tell that at all because I got too emotional. So let's try and read the poem.
Let's do it.
Let's give it. So it's called I Wish I Was a Dog by Henry, age 9. If I was a dog, I wouldn't know. I could play with all my doggy friends and jump in the mud. I asked my mum, she said it was a virus, a very scary virus. I wish I was a dog because I wouldn't know. I found it very scary, like the World War II again. I wish I was a dog because I wouldn't know. Like my dog Jack, he can go out and walk with all his friends. I wish I was a dog because I wouldn't know. It's just, it got me.
Wow. Good old Henry. Well, good young Henry, I should say, really.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff, Henry.
And it just made me realise just how important learning poetry, especially for young children, if they can't find the words to say something, that they could maybe try and write it out in a poetry form. So that was really nice. So I wanted to give a shout out to Henry School for giving him that, although I can't remember the name of the school.
That's one brilliant kind of a shout out. You're absolutely right, though. I mean, I've been very, very moody this week and very sort of doom and gloom about the theatre industry. I should point out that we're recording on June the 20. Where are we? June the 25th or 6th, and we've just had
24.
Easing of lockdown. June the 24th. Thank you. Easing of lockdown, and cinemas can reopen. But still no word on theatres, even though a packed aeroplane is totally okay. And I'm starting to get really upset about it all. And then I remember, good God, what about people whose careers haven't even begun yet? What if you've just left drama school and spent 3 years paying for that? Or if you're 8 years old and you don't even realise, what's happening? It must be so hard.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, like when this was written, it was right at the beginning of lockdown. So, it was, and it really, I guess it impacted my sister quite a lot and myself quite a lot, because it was just like, oh, I wish I was a dog too.
So you've also heard from, is it Abby that you heard from?
Yes, I have.
Right.
Sorry.
Tell us
Yeah.
about Abby.
Now, Abby was brilliant because she got in touch and said, well, I don't know if this is of interest, but, I've done lots of different things. And I was like, oh, this is perfect because it reminded me of Dusty Limits, our episode with Dusty Limits, where he said, try everything. And Abby has tried everything. It's amazing. I love it. I love it. She's like, well, I've done photography, I bake, I've done ceramics, knitting, writing, learning the guitar, and
Is this all during lockdown that she's tried these?
no,
Or
not
just during life?
just during life. So she's done loads of different things. She did recently do. This is how I know she listens to the podcast as well. She's done my burlesque course.
Right.
She was, and her last routine that she did was inspired by clowning, and she was a bit of a clown within it. And so, as a result, her next course that she has her eye on is clowning.
Well, does she, by any chance, have somebody in mind as a clowning teacher?
Well, not yet, but I think our next guest.
Well, Abby, if you don't sign up to do clowning with our next guest, I personally would suggest that was an epic fail, I think is what the young people are saying, because she's done clowning with me, and I think she's amazing. And I've taken a lot of her own tenets and principles and adapted them to my work with cabaret performers. So I guess this is a good moment to introduce our guest for what is the final episode of Series 1 of Up Your Arts, and a great person to go out with a bang with. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the screen, it's Peta Lily.
Hi.
Hi, Emily. Thank you both. Thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome, darling. Now, as I told you, and as listeners are kind of used to by now, if there's any kind of shape to what Emily and I do for 45 minutes with people that we've hoodwinked into doing it, it is that Emily has a list of questions which she tries to get through, and I derailed the whole thing by interrupting like an annoying penguin. So I'm going to let, because Emily doesn't know as much about you and your work as I do, so I'm going to sit back and let you two chat for a minute. The white middle-aged man is going to try not to speak. Let's see how long we do.
Oh dear. Uh-oh. So I guess I wanted to kind of just kick off with, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
I do a bunch of different things, Emily. I started my performing life as an actor, and then I came to this country and I started working with mime and dance, and then joined a mime company, but we kind of were stretching the boundaries of mime. This was before the word physical theatre, and then physical theatre. And then I left that company. I became a soloist. So I do a bunch of different things. I direct, I teach, I perform, I make works of art, I write things.
A bit of everything.
Bit of everything, yeah.
Great. Because, you mentioned physical theatre. I'm really quite interested in that side of things, because my very first show that I ever stage managed at university was a physical theatre piece, and this was back in 98, and I had no clue what physical theatre was at all. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about it? It was a crash course for me.
Yeah, so I'm sure someone will have a more refined answer than me. It in the early days, because I was there right at the very beginning, and there were people bringing in circus skills, people bringing in music. I'd come, as I say, with this little mime company. We were Britain's first all-female mime troupe. And we travelled all around the UK, and we went to Europe as well. But even there, we would introduce words, so we weren't purists. Things. So it's a sort of melange of things coming together. Of course, Jacques Lecoq had a huge influence on the state of affairs. And people have taken it in their own ways. Some ways will look very different to other ways. What was the show that you did, Emily? What did it look like?
So it was Anton Artaud, The Spurt of Blood. Yeah. So yeah, basically, because it was my first time stage managing, I knew nothing. I was my first week at university, and I got handed this script saying, "This is your script," and I was like, "This is 3 pages long. How do I make a book up with this?" I don't know. And, yeah, so I was involved in the process of watching them develop the piece as well. So they'd only just started rehearsals when I got involved. And yeah, it was just so amazing to watch the guys string out these 3 pages. It was really string out, but the concept that came into it, I had to make tons of blood because there was lots of blood thrown around towards the end. I can't remember much more about it. It was over 20 years ago now. But yeah, they were climbing over each other. I remember they had somebody come in especially to teach them about, like, they built a kind of wall almost where one of them had to climb up the other 3. And then we had a kind of drum and bass beat throughout the whole piece as well. And there was a lot of shouting and wailing and "I love you." And everything. I think they repeated that several times.
Can I just point out for people that aren't watching on YouTube and that may only have the audio version of Up Your Arts on, when Emily said the name of that show a moment ago, Peter's eyes went really, really wide.
Can I say, because I didn't think I heard the real title. I heard The Skirt of
Oh.
So my brain's like really, and I'm sure that's not correct. What was it? The what of blood?
Spurt of Blood.
Oh,
Spurt of Blood. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I now want to see the production of The Skirt of Blood. But,
Yeah.
Well, we did a show, 3 Women Days. That was the name of the Britain's first all-female mime troupe. And we worked with the amazing Hilary Westlake, who was one of the founding members of the very seminal Lumiere and Son Theatre Company, and she did a piece for us called Wounds. Hilary liked to go to that, she'd go, what is the essence? She went to clowning. What is the essence of clowning? They're hurt so that the audience can laugh. She was thinking of slapstick and the circus clowns. And then what's the essence of women? They bleed. So we did this piece, the 3 of us, we researched all the washable fabrics, and there were 3 of us in these different white costumes. And Hilary worked with amazing sort of rhythmic pattern dancers, and then we had sections of movement that were dealing with different aspects. It was all what's non-verbal, actually. And then suddenly there'd be some blood would appear from somewhere. I think I was first, and some blood came out of my breast, and then the next one was blood came out of Tessa's mouth, and then it ended up right at the end. Blood had come from various places, and Claudia sort of put up this umbrella, and it rained blood on her. Very exciting.
Did all physical theatre have blood in it?
That's on the theme. I would like to tell you, in my later career, I started doing solo works. One of the aspects of, for me, physical theatre is this thing of authorship, having a voice that you can recreate. So as a woman in the 80s, roles were still fairly limited, but if you're doing a solo show, you can play the tree, the detective, the woman, the cabaret performer. You can do all these things. So I did a show that was directed by David Glass. It was called Beg, and it was a schlock horror David Cronenberg thing. It was inspired by me looking at Paula Rego's amazing paintings, the early ones with the girls holding the doggy, in a strange way. And I have to thank David glass because he gave me this wonderful gift, because all my shows come from a problem, a what's wrong, a something that I'm not happy about or don't understand. And I was very congested around relationships and my relationships with my father and my brother and things like that. And so David said to me, I was thinking, oh, there's a woman and there's a rapist on the loose. And he's saying, yeah, why don't you play a serial killer? And I said, well, no, statistically, women are not serial killers, you know. And he said, it's a better part. And I went, I'm listening. So he created this thing, and he was reading about how it was also, this is terrible, creativity up your arts, how it was a creative act. I'm not recommending this anyone. Please don't become a serial killer. That you know, that they would be healing some trauma by doing these acts, you know, ritualistic acts. And so we invented the story of a female surgeon who she was so disappointed by men that she would kill them, and not kill them, knock them out, sew them inside. No, sew a dog inside them.
Right, obviously, yes.
Yeah, that works better. I was like, whoa, but COVID. Yeah, she'd cut them open, sew a dog inside them with this in her madness, thinking that because dogs are loyal and loving and obedient, that it would make a better man. And then, of course, you know, the man would come around and then the dog would explode out of his stomach. But in that show, the culmination of that show with the amazing Philip Paulus from Showstoppers, he was my co-performer, was literally naked on a plastic coated futon, and I'm there in black bra and pants and black gloves and a hedge clippers, stabbing and cutting, and he's shooting these blood bags, Kensington Super Gore. You probably met that when a spurt of blood. And you know, it was just great for me because I got to see an entire audience like, whoa, back like they were on a fair, you know, like what's that roller coaster, you know, that sort of lean back thing. So that was a very therapeutic and cathartic show to be in. That involved blood. I will stop talking about blood from here on in.
Peter, you spoke earlier on about the essence of clowning, and I just wondered if we could sort of backpedal there a little bit to anybody listening that has no idea what clowning is, that thinks it's a clown with a red nose that turns up at a children's party and that some people are scared of. There's clowns and then there's clowning, isn't there? And yes. Are they different things? Can you sort of speak to that a bit?
Well, there's been an element of clown throughout history. People have written great books on it. John Davison's very clever because he goes, there's no direct lineage. It sort of erupts like fungus in every, you know, the mycelium is the big new thing, isn't it? It's that we're discovering how wonderful bacteria that we've relegated to the depths. And but anyway, sorry, I'm going off. But going off point. Clowning is a beautiful thing because it's a stripping away. In terms of performance, people generally compose a character, or at least that was in vogue up until 80s, 90s. You know, now more and more people include the clowning because it does it. If you use the little red nose, which I tend not to do, but the little red nose goes on and the mask, the social mask, comes off.
Right, yeah.
The clown is in the here and now. The clown says yes to everything, even the painful things. It's almost like I've come to this over the years, over the 30 years of teaching clown, and then we're probably going to talk about my dark clown work, which is another thing, you know, another different sort of explanation. But
certainly are, yeah.
Clowning is this state of openness, and it becomes without making it sound sentimental or holy, it's a kind of spirituality. It's more of a sort of Buddhist one flavor spirituality where the clown can accept things, and the clown also needs to be very compassionate towards the audience. And the clown practitioner needs to practice self-compassion, because there are those moments when you're shielding yourself from failure or shielding yourself from laughter. Some people have this double thing that they're there, oh, I'm frightened I won't be funny, but then when the laughter comes, they've got some trigger of the laughter happening for a completely different reason, so an undefending, it's a beautiful art form, and an enduring one, and one that can take on board many changes. I think there's Phil Berger, who his clown's Dr. Brown. I saw an article recently where he was working with it in the context of burlesque and trans sort of non-binary burlesque. Anyway, I can't remember the whole, but awesome, because the clown can be anything.
Because you spoke just then about, stuff that sounds really, really exposing and scary and raw. And having done, your clown and your dark clown course, I can attest that it can be. And my cabaret courses, people are often say very, very scary. And I think there's something, I remember on your course, there was, if we weren't looking at the audience to gauge their reaction, and therefore to know how to respond, that was a big deal. There was a lot of that. So the lack of fourth wall, which also the yes. Cabaret that has, there's definitely a link there. And I suppose the same with burlesque, Emily, which you teach.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually have people from a clowning background come and teach my character classes, because I just think, like you're saying, it's in burlesque you do have to kind of strip away and be, well, you do physically as well, but mentally as well, because you have to be prepared for whatever's going to happen when you're on stage. And what's lovely is that they come in and do a lot of games, which the students aren't prepared for, because I've come for a burlesque class, why am I playing games? And it's like, no, but that really helps. And then by the end of the class, they're like, oh, that's brilliant, I have some great ideas of how I can develop what I'm doing. And yeah, it's wonderful. I think clowning is just so brilliant, and like bringing in character and teaching character through clowning is just essential, I think, for especially for cabaret anyway. Yeah. It's I don't know if there's a question in that, but there we go.
An opening up, it's an opening up to possibility. And then people often say to me, this is useful in life, for example.
Yeah, right.
With the clown. And I think that is great. A flexible for comedy in general. Well, unless you're doing like a kind of comedy from, you've got a clear comic character, and there are some comics that are only scathing, but not so many of those nowadays. But
yeah, there's definitely a strand of comedy, isn't there? Like you say, it's getting less and less popular, but there are some that say no. So you might be having a back and forth with your comedy partner or somebody else on the panel of the game show that you're on, and one particular person, the basis of what they do to get laughs is to go, no, I reject that, and that's why and this is funny. But that's not really what happens with clowning from what I've observed. We say yes, right?
Yeah, you say yes. And yeah, we were talking about sort of opening up to possibility and opening up into a flow state. I had a woman who'd done workshop with me ages ago who does this wonderful freeform yoga. I look at her pictures on Instagram and I go, how, she's just incredible. And she said, oh, I never forget what you said in clown, see things with equal potential possibility. And that other yogistas are saying to her, how do you dare get these shapes? How do you think of these new? She invents her own sequences, and she actually said, "Can I phone you?" And we had a little phone conversation about how those two things interlinked. Oh, there was something else I wanted to say, Paul. What were you just saying about looking?
Well, I sort of touched on the fact that it was quite raw and scary and brave, the clowning, and I guess I wanted to go on to ask you what your experience as a teacher and as a practitioner, a performer, is of resistance to the work. Yes.
Now you see, I love the way you say raw and scary. I try not to use those words.
They're the words I hear from my students. about similar things that you and I both teach these days.
Yeah, it's it can be exposing. Years ago, I did this funny thing called the Life Game. Came out of Findhorn, and it took a whole day to play this thing. It's like, oh, and you pulled cards and everything, and at the end you got one little thing, one tiny little card, and my card was vulnerability is the perfect protection.
Oh God, can you say that again?
Vulnerability is the perfect protection.
Wow.
And it's great. It does a Zen thing because it's like a paradox, isn't it? It's like one hand clapping.
That makes complete sense to what you were just saying about the yoga practitioner that you know, and from my own yoga practice, sort of, I know this sounds just like something people say, but how much of it is in the mind, telling yourself you can't do something, or that you don't want to go there, or that you shouldn't go there, whether that be yoga, burlesque, cabaret, or clowning,
Yes. If everything has one flavour, if we stop, this would be helpful for the world, wouldn't it? Because we've got right and wrong and vaccine or no vaccine. But if people had a bit less opinion, that's where creativity can come in. And if you change your perspective and vary your standpoint, the clown practitioner needs to be listening to their breathing, they're feeling the rhythms inside themselves. They need to be noticing the person they're playing with, and they need to be sniffing out. I call it sniff the beast. It's just, I like to give funny phrases, serious ones. Sometimes it backfires, but you just kind of get a sense of them. You don't know, oh, that man 3 along from the end needs this. The language bit of the brain can't think about it quickly enough, but you just kind of go, okay, you just see where they're all at and do whatever you can. I like to think about energy coming out of your own body and going where it needs to go.
There's I'm sure I've told this story like 3 times now on Up Your Arts, but it's a very good story. So I'm going to tell it again.
Of course, here we go again.
When I work at Café de Paris and they have a cabaret on, before the cabaret, usually there's a close-up magician and they're out on the floor whilst people are dining. And very kindly, often the close-up magician will come up to me when I'm hosting pre-show and tell me who's out there and where they're sat and what they've been like with them so far, whether there's a big group of hens and they're up for a party, or these people on the left are Swiss and they don't understand anything I'm saying, and just sort of giving me pointers. And it got to the stage where I had to ask them to stop telling me who was out there.
Yes.
Before I stepped out through the curtains and started the show, because I don't want to know. It's very, for me, Peter, and I wonder what you think about this, it's against everything you've ever taught me as far as sort of accepting whatever's going to happen next and whoever's there.
Yeah, I think so. And I wonder if this was the little half forgotten thought I had, but once I had someone in the class who was, and I was emphasizing, have a look through that fourth wall. There is no fourth wall, just look. And this person was coming from doing a burlesque act where, I don't know if she was completely naked. It was her and another performer. I think they used to perform together. And she said, I tend not to look at them. So you have to bear in mind what your venue is.
Tend not to look at the other performer or the audience? Okay, yeah.
So, she needed to look over their heads for what she was doing. And I presume she wasn't necessarily using a lot of comedy. So it's just like, you got to work around it, haven't you? So there's always there's the rule and there's the exception to the rule. So we're talking about noticing where your audience is at. I've got a good Goliath analogy, but she really interested me that day when, I'm going, for that sake, she's doing the right thing. She's making a frame. She's going, I'm here in this reality. Because that was what her act, her needed. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I always think that with burlesque, it needs the audience interaction. It needs the conversation between the performer and the audience.
Yes.
So I find that interesting, is that she's like, I can't look at them. I'm like, But
Yeah.
oh,
And then-
I couldn't imagine going on stage and not. That's very
I know.
interesting. Yeah.
And maybe since then she
Yeah.
found a way to do it. But I have been in cabaret where people are like talking out at the audience but not actually doing that noticing. And most people don't notice that they're not really noticing. But when
there are some, I'm not going to say any names, but there are some extremely famous and extremely successful acts that call themselves cabaret, but do not have never subscribed to the tenets of no fourth wall and directly speaking to the audience. So it's it's not that everybody agrees on what cabaret is. I think it's becoming more and more prevalent, this idea of go right there to the whites of their eyes, but not everybody does it, and maybe that's fear, maybe that's choice, maybe it's I don't know.
Yeah.
Either. Yeah. I mean, like I said, that was new to me.
Well, I did notice from what you were talking about, the show you made a while back was this the serial killer one with all the blood and the stabbing and all of the things, in spite of us speaking about some things being scary and brave. This sounds tremendously powerful, what you got to do and who you got to become. So there is a payoff, isn't there, to the bravery, if that is a word that you can start.
Yeah, this is a big theme of mine, which is take your pain, take your problem, do something with it. And you might well have. I had a lot of fears. In those days, I was terrified at the fact that I was going to be in bra and pants. Thought there'd be someone waiting for me after the show. They'll come and get me. I was frightened, but the way the whole thing was, with David Gloucester's dramaturgy, it set up this thing where, it was very powerful. And while I was there, I had this monologue because there'd been this fairy tale theme throughout, and she was just going, and the girl's hands did grow back, and she could weave the straw into gold, because in fairy tales, women get a hard deal, and her legs could work again, So she kind of stitch after stitch after stitch. That was the final lines of the piece.
Have I ever told either of you about my favourite Jeanette Winterson's short story? It's her version of the 12 Dancing Princesses.
Yeah.
I feel like I've said to at least one of you before, oh, please, let's make this into a show. It's Jeanette Winterson's very sort of modern, female, powerful version of the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, where they don't need the princes. They don't necessarily go off with the princes. Some of them live on their own very happily. Some of them stab the prince to death and then live happily after that. One of the princes is actually a woman dressed up, and they actually live together as women, and they're much happier without some bloke around. It's all this good stuff, and there's 12 of them. It could totally be a theatre piece, and it's weaved together by one male narrator in her version. And I don't know, I feel like the three of us might be the people to make it happen.
I'm in with that. I'm very much in with that.
It's inside her novel Sexing the Cherry, and it's a lovely, lovely little vignette of its own. So I highly recommend having a read.
Thank you.
Now I'm starting to look at the clock, and we haven't even got round to the question, which is the difference between clown and dark clown.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Come on.
I was like, do we have time? Can we?
Quick. Elevator pitch.
No, I think we've got time.
Dark Clown grew for me out of a moment when I saw a scene in a show and I laughed in a particular way. And this quality of laughter compelled me. And then I spent years doing exercises, building an approach. So dark clowning makes the kind of, so a little proviso, some people reserve the right for the red-nosed clown not to create laughter. But I'm very interested in laughter in general. I've always loved it. I had a grim childhood. What can I say? And, comedy is always, why would anyone not want to laugh? So the mechanics of laughter fascinated me, and I built these up. So if you can generate laughter in a darker context, then you're providing people with the release of sound making in resonance to something. That all sounds very intellectual, doesn't it? If you've got sort of a bit of nervousness about you, which I do, and a truck beeps its horn, you know, if you're me, you flinch and jump. And because I don't care, I will probably call out, fuck. Sorry, I'm allowed to swear.
It's fine. Yeah, okay. I mean, we were talking about dogs and humans earlier, so yeah, carry on.
I want it to sound because it discharges some of the tension. You know, it's fear is a clenching. So coming back to dark clown, if I'm drawing a line here for people who are just listening to the podcast, if you have a sort of horizontal line, and if you think put red-nosed clown at one end of it and dark clown at the other end of it, and if this line represents human expression, because the clown is there to be more human than humans. You know, in our sad, normal guise, you know, when I'm in pret-a-manger or, you know, frustrated about my Oyster card, we try to hide the inconvenient moments, whereas the clown is there, it fails, and it makes sure it's visible. It allows the audience to have the relief at laughing that, look at that idiot over there, or thank God I've done that too. You know, there's a relief and a release. So red-nosed clown, dark clown. Red-nosed clown primarily is, not primarily, but usually funniness, silliness, loveliness, hopefulness, enthusiasm, bossiness, grumpiness, tetchiness, even anger. You can get an angry clown. But then if that continuum continues into the realm of shame, horror, physical pain, existential angst, guilt, dread. Yeah, that is, so it's just extending, allowing there to be laughter, a different kind of laughter. People are now laughing and they're not scot-free as we are when we laugh at the red-nosed clown. We go, ha, look at that idiot, can't even cross their legs properly. They fell off, you know, the chair. But the dark clown, they laugh and they can still see the horror of the predicament that the dark clown is in.
And this is something that you created, Peter. And there's a book.
There is a book on the way. I'm writing it as we speak. Yeah, that very important process of procrastination. I've done a bunch of writing. I took myself off for a writing retreat back last year when the world was open, and I did a chunk. And then I've been writing blog posts, and I need to assemble it. I remembered that other thing I didn't say, I wanted to say.
Yeah, do.
Which is lovely Angela de Castro. I don't know if she invented it, but I heard someone say that Angela de Castro gets people to do their clown coat of arms. You know, like a city like Leeds would have a coat of arms.
So to literally get out some pens and paper and to design one that speaks to your clown. Oh, that's lovely. Yes, I like that.
Oh, I like that too.
It's really fun. And I get my students to do it now, and anything will go in it. They'll have, you know, like a monkey in a tutu, or, you know, some of them like to have a little pile of poo. Not really my kind of humor, but there you go. It makes them smile. It's what they saw. And then you have a thing underneath, a motto, you know?
Yeah, in Latin, yeah. In
Latin. And my motto could be I could translate it into Latin, but it doesn't have the same word rhythm. And my motto is dignity in no dignity.
Nice. Now you know what mine is, Peter, because I created it working with you.
I was going to say it. Do you want to say it, or will I say it?
No, you say it. You say it.
It was wonderful. Paul had done the clown and dark clown. You did
both. Yeah.
Did the clown and dark clown course, and then I don't know. You emailed me or messaged me in some manner and said, after the course, he said, I've got my clown mantra. and it's expect nothing, accept everything.
And I literally stand backstage before shows begin, and I say it out loud to myself, almost. And I host a show that Emily produces, so that's what I'm doing behind the curtain just before we open. Emily, is I'm saying the words that this woman inspired me to put into my life. Listen, I've got one last question before we start wrapping up. I'm sure that Emily, there'll be time for one from you too. We were speaking earlier on quite a lot about sort of airing pain, airing misfortune, the what I think of as sort of scarier, rawer parts of our lives. And the three of us all having talked in different ways, I wonder what people's take here is on the arts as therapy, and where's the line?
Yeah.
Is it, because I'm sorry to say that over the years as a promoter, I don't mind it happening in a rehearsal room. Of course it must happen in a rehearsal room. But as a promoter and a host of shows, there is a difference, isn't there, between using your life experience and being brave enough to share it and turning that into a piece of art and putting it on stage, and bringing a lot of stuff that isn't perhaps yet dealt with fully and dumping that in front of an audience in a perhaps less artistic way. Is there a difference? I shouldn't be telling you there is. Is there a difference?
Well, this is you need the art, you need the strategy, you need the compassion for the audience. You need to be crafting something that will, yes, we're allowed to provoke, but entertain. It's not for you. And this is the joy of using your pain, is that in crafting, in taking a difficult period, which I've done more than once in my life, and then having to make a show out of it, then you have to craft some kind of story. And when you're crafting a story has to be followable beat by beat by beat. So usually when I'm starting to make a show, I go, well, what is this most like? How's it going to end? What kind, is it a story of, transformation? Is it a story of what's it actually about? And is it the story of Job, or is it, you to kind of go to a myth and think, is it like this? And then it's often not like anything in particular, but you have created something. And in the case of my show Topless, which I made in 1999, which was about 2 years full of stress-inducing events, now when I look back, I remember, and I deliberately made it funny, there's one moment of pathos, nicely positioned. I deliberately made it funny. Now when I look back on those 2 years, I see the cartoon version. I see the comedy version, and all the jokes we had about radiotherapy and this, that, and the other. So it's a great way to reframe. It's that neurolinguistic programming concept of reframing your reality. But I think you've got to love theatre. You've got to love that exchange, or if you're making a film, you've got to love film. You've got to allow an audience to go on some kind of journey.
So the phrase "it's not for you" that you said just a moment ago.
Say that. Well, it's for you, but it's got to be for them, not just for you. Yeah,
it's not just for you. Yeah. I love the question, "Who is this for?" To just pose that to yourself or on anything you might be thinking of creating. I think it stands as, I don't think there's a right answer, and I don't think it's always the same answer for everything one creates, but I think it's a damn good question nevertheless,
And I think you kind of hit there really well, like the journey, because thinking about the journey that the audience are going on as well as you. So I think that's something really important. That just when you said there, the journey, I was like, yes, because you're thinking about how the story flows. It's got to, they've got to feel that they've come along with you almost, if you're choosing to do something that's almost therapy wise. Yes, that's my thought.
Yeah, exactly. I agree, Emily. And I recently, I had a lunch a while back in the olden days when we could be out. I had lunch with someone and she said, you see, I don't believe, this is contrary to my last 30 years. She said, I don't believe in putting something on stage that people can't walk out of. So that was a very strong way of going, oh fuck, they're doing a show about their, the day their cat was run over, and so I thought, well, that's good. But I like to think, well, anyone can walk out if they, I mean, anyone can walk out.
Yeah,
if they
I
need
like it.
to, and
It's a badge of honor, I think. People
that's for
during the show
you.
go, okay, good, that's good.
Yeah.
We're on to something here. If
That's
someone's
yeah.
offended,
for you.
if it's too much for someone, and they've shown that in this with the strength an English audience of all, a British audience of all people, to get up and choose to leave, I feel like, okay, we're on to something. Listen,
Exactly.
I know we're running over, but I don't care because it's Peta Lily and it's the last episode. Emily, have you got one last question?
Well, it was really, I suppose, maybe we go back to the old one of what are you passionate about in the arts? Well,
I'm passionate about, I used to say, sharing the joy of laughter and telling original stories.
Okay.
I don't know if I've updated that. I'm very interested in niche events, as niche as I can get, given that I am, have the privilege of being white and cisgender looking and all of that. Yeah. But I'm interested in the predicaments. I'm currently trying to create some dark clown scenarios around COVID, which I hope to do with great delicacy, because I don't normally do things that are too raw. They're raw emotions. With the dark clown, you can use the word raw, to this sort of humanity in extremis, but to get the thing out there, to allow us to witness it. Theatre is a place where we can sit and have emotions about a thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I leave my house back in the days when we could leave. I leave my house, I travel on the bus, I walk past 5 people living on the street underneath the bridge. I get on the tube. I hate my fellow humans just because it's too crowded. We haven't got time to grieve. You feel guilty. You haven't got time to process. Then you see the news. That's a wonderful thing about this moment, is that we do have more time, so that when these big earth-shattering events come up and people, so more of the globe, there's a big resistance to it, but more of the globe are putting their attention on all of the experiences of the world. All of the stories need telling.
I've sort of primed Peta before we started that we were going to ask if she might have something top tip for our listeners. And
that was the one I was meant to say.
Emily, I have to say, I think it's a really tricky ask for our guests, because we've only got the slightest grasp who our listeners are, so they certainly don't know. But what we think is that we've got a mixture of people who are listening at the moment who are interested in training courses, part-time training courses, further education, mostly adults, people who are interested in burlesque and cabaret and comedy, and now, of course, clowning. But I think creativity in general life is also part of what we're excited about, and that what we're trying to champion, I suppose, because if schools and governments aren't going to do it, then somebody else is going to have to. So with that extremely broad remit, Peta, or anything that's come up in the last half an hour, 40 minutes, is there anything any nugget you'd like to leave with our guests, our listeners, sorry?
Thank you. I'll probably do a slender list if that's okay, because you gave me warning about this beforehand. So things that you can do, things that I like to do are, if you're having a worry, why don't you sit down and write a poem about it? Or if you don't want to do that, why don't you open a book and draw a picture? Here's one I did earlier.
Oh, I love that. I love forcing people to go to the YouTube version of our
Oh,
podcast.
sorry, yes, go to the YouTube version. Oh, and I'm going to, yeah. And then the other thing is just because I like my tea lights and matchboxes, and I've got all the subscriptions. You know, I get the Tate, and so I'm showing pictures of my matchboxes here where I've collaged, used pictures from the Tate.
Oh, you put those
To make
onto your
collages.
matchboxes.
Yeah,
oh
do
my
it.
God.
Pritt stick. What
Other glues are available.
I say? And then, if in doubt, you know, buy you.
Get your rubber chicken out.
Chicken out. You have some ducks. You know, some ducks.
People, if you are listening to this only, please God find the YouTube version and see what Peter just did. It's just brilliant. It's actually, the woman basically lives with a lot of rubber animals. Listen, we are running out of time. First of all, a huge thank you to our very special guest in this final episode of Series 1 of Up Your Arts, Peta Lily. Huge round of applause, everybody. The crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. And of course, people can always go on my website and learn about my workshops, and I'd love to see them either on the little Zoom screen or in the flesh.
Yeah, I highly recommend Clown and Dark Clown, or anything Peter's doing. She's a tremendous woman, as you've all just learned. Now, Emily and I will be back very soon. We're just taking a little break to recover from, well, a pandemic, frankly. We've valiantly, with the help of Geek doing the tech, we've valiantly managed to carry on bringing you 12 episodes from the beginning of this year, but I think it's time for everyone to have a little rest. So yeah, we'll regroup soon, and we'll be back to discover how the arts can enrich your life.
Yay! Which they do. I think we're on the lines of discovering they do. That's.
All right, good. Well, that doesn't mean I'm not going to stop asking the questions. I'm going to keep asking. Emily, how can people find out about us and get in touch?
You can still find us on Twitter at Up Your Arts, and on the old link tree, linktr.ee/Up Your Arts. You can find us there, and Luscious Cabaret website, Paulus, Paul L. Martin's website as well.
And of course, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'd love a review on Apple if you've got 2 minutes. And which of us has not? Quite frankly, right now. Great stuff. Thanks very much to Peta Lily. Thank you to the wonderful team at Up Your Arts. We will be back next time. Lots of love and keep creating. Bye-bye.
Bye.